The Ryder Cup has produced triumphs, but also chaos, tantrums, and humiliation. From Patrick Reed's locker room betrayal to Bubba Watson's crowd fiasco, these are the 10 most embarrassing Ryder Cup moments ever, and that's just the warm-up. Number 10, Colin Montgomerie versus the Hecklers. The Ryder Cup is supposed to be golf's showcase of skill, respect, and tradition, but in 1999 at Brookline, Massachusetts, it turned into something far uglier. At the center of it all, Colin Montgomerie. Monty was one of Europe's biggest stars, a Ryder Cup warrior known for his icy composure. But that week, the Boston galleries didn't see a champion, they saw a target. From the moment he stepped onto the course, the abuse rained down. Shouts about his weight, cruel digs at his looks, even personal insults about his family. Imagine trying to line up a crucial shot while thousands of voices mock you like it's a schoolyard taunt. Montgomerie tried to block it out, but golf is a game of focus, and the heckling was relentless. Every swing came with jeers. Every step, another insult. What should have been a proud Ryder Cup performance became an exercise in humiliation. And here's the sting. It wasn't just Monty's reputation that took a hit. It was the sport itself. Golf had always prided itself on silence, etiquette, and respect. But Brookline turned into a madhouse, and the Ryder Cup's image took a scar that still hasn't fully healed. A legend reduced to enduring playground abuse, while the so-called gentleman's game descended into chaos. But heckling was only the beginning. Soon it wouldn't be the fans embarrassing themselves, it would be the players. Number 9, Patrick Reed airs dirty laundry, Paris 2018. The Ryder Cup has always been about unity, teammates standing shoulder to shoulder, taking on the pressure together, but in Paris 2018, Patrick Reed made sure the story wasn't about unity, it was about betrayal. For years, Reed and Jordan Spieth had been Team USA's golden pairing. Fierce, reliable, practically unstoppable. But when Captain Jim Furyk split them up, the chemistry shattered. Spieth was paired with Justin Thomas. Reed was left alongside Tiger Woods, who was still shaking off years of injuries and personal struggles. The result? Disaster. The Reed-Woods duo stumbled to defeat after defeat, visibly uncomfortable and totally out of sync. And then came the real embarrassment. Instead of swallowing the loss and moving on, Reed went nuclear. In a post-Ryder Cup interview with the New York Times, he openly blamed his teammates and his captain. He claimed Spieth didn't want to play with me and accused Furyk of mismanaging the lineup. Think about that. While Europe celebrated the crushing 17.5 to 10.5 victory, Reed was tearing his own locker room apart in America's biggest newspaper. The fallout was brutal. Fans called him selfish. Teammates distanced themselves. Suddenly, the man once nicknamed Captain America looked more like the villain of the piece. Because here's the truth, losing hurts. But losing and throwing your own team under the bus? That's unforgettable. When your own teammate buries you in print, you know things are ugly. And as bad as that was, the next moment proves even showmanship itself can blow up in your face. Number 8, Bubba Watson's crowd conducting backfires. For over a century, golf had one ironclad rule: silence while the player swings. But Bubba Watson wasn't interested in tradition. At Medina in 2012, he wanted chaos. Walking onto the first tee, Bubba waved his arms like a rock star, demanding the thousands packed into the grandstands make noise. And they did. The atmosphere was electric, cheers, chants, and roars echoing through the amphitheater. It wasn't golf anymore. It was a concert. Then came the moment of truth. Bubba stepped to his ball, the crowd screaming at fever pitch, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He took the club back, unleashed a mighty swing, and watched in horror as the ball veered left, diving straight into the bunker. Silence fell, not because the crowd was supposed to be quiet, but because nobody could believe it. The man who turned golf's sacred tradition upside down had just made himself the punchline. To make matters worse, his opponent calmly followed with a clean drive, clearing the trouble with ease. What was meant to be a power move became an embarrassment replayed on highlight reels for years. Bubba wanted a symphony. Instead, he got static. Sometimes silence really is golden, and if you think embarrassing yourself on the tee is bad, wait until you see what happens when a caddy steals the spotlight from one of the Ryder Cup's biggest stars. Number 7, Joe LaCava versus Rory McIlroy. The Ryder Cup thrives on drama, but in Rome, the spotlight swung to someone who wasn't even swinging a club. Saturday evening, the match hanging in the balance. Patrick Cantlay stands over a massive birdie putt on the 18th. He drains it, the American bench erupts, and that's when his caddy, Joe LaCava, decides to take center stage. LaCava struts across the green, twirling his cap in the air, mocking the European fans who had spent all day waving hats at Cantlay. Harmless fun? Not quite. Rory McIlroy was still lining up his own putt to tie the hole, and LaCava wasn't just celebrating. He was standing in Rory's line of sight. Imagine being one of the world's best players, staring down a must-make putt, only to see someone's caddy waving a hat in your face. Rory snapped. He confronted LaCava right there on the green, pointing, shouting, demanding respect. The air turned electric. Players and caddies rushed in to separate them, but the fire was lit, and it didn't end there. Hours later, cameras caught McIlroy in the parking lot still raging. Teammates had to physically hold him back as he screamed across the cars. The clip went viral instantly. In the end, Europe turned the incident into fuel, using it as motivation to finish the job the next day. But the embarrassment was clear. A Ryder Cup remembered not for a brilliant shot, but for a caddy's antics. But sometimes it's not a fight, it's a putt that shatters reputations. Number 6. Phil Mickelson publicly torches Tom Watson. Gleneagles 2014. Team USA has just been crushed again, 16.5 to 11.5. Another Ryder Cup gone, another painful reminder of Europe's dominance. The American squad files into the post-match press conference, shoulders slumped, faces grim, and at the center of it all sits Tom Watson, the legendary captain brought back at 65 years old to restore the magic. A reporter asks a simple question: what went right in 2008, the last time the US actually won? Phil Mickelson leans forward, and with Watson sitting just feet away, he delivers the most brutal public takedown in Ryder Cup history. Phil praises Paul Azinger's system from 2008, how players had input, how partnerships were chosen collaboratively, how the captain built chemistry and trust. His words are calm, almost polite, but the message is a dagger. That's leadership, and we didn't have it this week. Watson sits stone-faced as one of the most decorated American players essentially calls him out on live television. It wasn't a heated locker room exchange. It wasn't a quiet private meeting. It was a public humiliation broadcast worldwide. The fallout was seismic. US Golf created an official Ryder Cup task force just to fix the mess, changing the entire structure of how captains and teams were chosen, all because one player broke the code of silence. Imagine getting humiliated by your own player on live TV, but that was nothing compared to the off-course embarrassment waiting just 4 years earlier when the wives became the story. Number 5. Reed versus Rory, the trash talk showdown. The Ryder Cup has always been fiery, but Hazeltine 2016 turned into pure theater. Imagine it, America trailing, tension thick in the air, and two gladiators step into the arena, Patrick Reed and Rory McIlroy. Both fed off the crowd like prize fighters, and neither planned on backing down. Reed struck first. After draining a birdie, he raised his arms and whipped the crowd into a frenzy, conducting them like a rock star at a stadium show. But Rory wasn't about to be overshadowed. On the very next hole, he rolled in a monster putt, turned to the crowd, and cupped his hand to his ear, daring them to roar louder. The back and forth was electric. Reed shushed European fans with a finger to his lips. Rory barked right back, fists pumping, veins bulging. Every hole became a duel, not just with clubs, but with bravado. It wasn't golf, it was gladiatorial combat dressed up in polos. And here's the kicker. When the dust settled, Reed edged out Rory by a single hole. The match was hailed as one of the greatest Ryder Cup singles battles in history. But for two supposed gentlemen of golf, it also blurred the line between brilliance and embarrassment. Number 4. Nick Faldo refuses to concede. The Ryder Cup is built on fierce rivalries, and few burned hotter than Nick Faldo versus Paul Azinger. By 1993 at the Belfry, their history stretched back years, each duel layered with tension. Now they were face to face in the final singles match. The cup itself was already decided. Team USA had clinched victory, but pride, that was still on the line. Faldo, stoic as ever, held a slim lead as they walked up the 18th. Both players hit the green. Faldo made his par, leaving Azinger with a 6-foot putt to have the match. Normally, this is where sportsmanship steps in. A short putt, a handshake, respect between warriors, but not this time. Faldo folded his arms, stared across the green, and refused to concede. The crowd gasped. Even Azinger looked momentarily stunned. but he bent down, lined it up, and rolled it straight into the center. Putt made, match halved, and Faldo left looking petty on a stage built for honor. The embarrassment didn't fade with time. Years later, after Azinger had survived a battle with cancer, he watched the replay again. His parting shot was brutal. "I had cancer and he still couldn't beat me." Painful for Faldo, but at least he didn't completely melt down under pressure, because the next moment isn't about grudge. Number 3. Christy O'Connor Jr.'s 2-iron gamble. The Ryder Cup has always been a crucible of pressure, but few moments captured humiliation so perfectly as what happened on the 18th at the Belfry in 1989. Christy O'Connor Jr., a quiet Irishman ranked well outside the game's elite, was staring down one of America's brightest young stars, Fred Couples. The match was tied, everything riding on the final hole. Couples blasted a massive drive, leaving himself a comfortable 9-iron approach. Advantage USA. Then came O'Connor. His drive had found the fairway, but he was left staring at a brutal 229 yards over water, the kind of shot that makes even pros sweat. What did he pull from the bag? A 2-iron, one of the most unforgiving clubs in golf. The crowd held its breath. He swung and delivered a strike for the ages. The ball soared high, piercing the sky, and landed just 4 feet from the hole. Absolute perfection. The Belfry erupted. Now the pressure was on Couples. All he had to do was answer from his prime position. Instead, he flinched. His approach missed badly. The opening door slammed shut. O'Connor calmly tapped in, securing the point for Europe and etching his name into Ryder Cup legend. And Couples, he was left humiliated, remembered not for his booming drive, but for being outclassed by one of the bravest shots in Cup history. But sometimes, the humiliation isn't about one shot, it's about an entire team collapse. Number 2. Team USA's celebration disaster. The 1999 Ryder Cup at Brookline was already electric. Europe led heading into Sunday, but the Americans had clawed back and the tension was unbearable. Then came the 17th hole, where everything changed. Justin Leonard faced a 45-foot birdie putt, the kind of desperate prayer you attempt when the cup is slipping away. He stroked it, and against all odds, the ball curled, rolled, and dropped. Bedlam erupted, and then embarrassment. Instead of waiting, instead of respecting the moment, the entire US team stormed the green. Players, caddies, even wives poured onto the putting surface in a frenzy, celebrating like the match was over. They shouted, hugged, stomped, and, most shockingly, trampled right across Jose Maria Olazabal's putting line. The Spaniard still had a putt to tie the hole, a real chance to keep Europe alive. Imagine standing there, putter in hand, while your opponent's entire squad parties on the exact patch of grass you need to put over. Olazabal could only watch, fuming, as order was slowly restored. Minutes later, he missed. The US completed their miracle comeback, 14.5 to 13.5. But the headlines weren't about the score, they were about disgrace. Across the world, critics called it the death of sportsmanship. For many in Europe, that green storming fiasco remains the Ryder Cup's lowest moment. The Americans won the cup, but they lost their dignity. But nothing compares to choking when the entire cup is on the line. Number 1. Bernhard Langer's 6-foot nightmare. They called it the War on the Shore. Kiowa Island in 1991, the Ryder Cup at its most hostile, with players trading glares, fans roaring like it was a prize fight, and national pride stretched to the breaking point. After 3 brutal days, it all came down to one man, Bernhard Langer. The cup was tied. The final singles match against Hale Irwin reached the 18th green. Europe needed Langer to hole a 6-foot putt to retain the trophy. 6 feet. The length every pro sinks 1,000 times in practice. But this wasn't practice. This was the Ryder Cup with the weight of a continent on his shoulders. He crouched, studied the line, and rolled the putt. For a moment, it looked true. Then the ball slid just past the edge, missed. The roar from the American crowd was deafening. Irwin's teammates swarmed him. The United States had won 14.5 to 13.5. And Langer? He stood frozen, a picture of devastation. A career filled with precision and composure reduced in that instant to one haunting miss. The legacy was brutal. Fair or not, Langer's name became forever tied to that 6-footer, replayed endlessly as the ultimate Ryder Cup heartbreak. Even decades later, when people talk about pressure, they talk about that putt. Imagine carrying that memory for life, the putt he'll never live down. From Bubba's bunker blunder to Rory's parking lot fury, and all the way to that unforgettable number 1, you've just seen Ryder Cup pressure at its most humiliating. Thanks for riding the full countdown with us. Now your turn. Which moment crossed the line the most, and why?